Good afternoon. My name is Brian Ciccarello. I'm a member of the City Club Youth Forum Council, and I am very pleased to welcome you this afternoon. Today at our Youth Forum, we will be presented with distinguished experts in 4 areas of education: local, academia, international, and policy perspectives. They will offer their viewpoints on education reform in Ohio. What is the current situation, what needs to change, and ideas about how we can affect the change. The Ohio education finance system was ruled unconstitutional by the state Supreme Court in 1997, although modified by 2000, again in 2001, and finally in 2003, that was still not satisfactory to the court. In 2007, the proposed amendment to the state constitution stating that Ohioans had a constitutional right to a high-quality education never made it to the ballot due to lack of signatures. Recently, the American education system as a whole has received much criticism due to statistical reports which demonstrate a struggle to keep pace with international counterparts. These esteemed experts have a vested interest in and have worked hard for a quality education in Ohio. Leading our discussion on Reformation Nation, the reform of education, I'd like to introduce Richard Crepage, Interim Administrative Director and Director of Education at the Cleveland Council on World Affairs. From our local perspective, I'd like to introduce Mark Freeman, Superintendent of Shaker Heights High School. For our perspective in academia, I'd like to introduce James McLoughlin, Dean of the College of Education at Cleveland State University. To provide us with an international perspective, I'd like to introduce Linda Robertson. She's the only woman on stage. Director of the Gerald H. Reed Center for International and Intercultural Education in the College and Graduate School of Education at Kent State University. And finally, for our perspective on education policy in Ohio, I'd like to introduce Julian Rogers, Executive Director of Education Voters of Ohio and Education Voters Institute. Please join me in welcoming the panel. I'll now turn it over to Mr. Crepage to begin the discussion. Mr. Crepage.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, folks, and it's my pleasure and honor to be here to serve as the moderator for this group, as well as to be sitting here with this group of distinguished folks in their respective fields for us to talk about education reform. We are going to begin with each of the panelists giving a little perspective on, first of all, their background and where their organization fits in this whole picture of education reform, followed by a few questions from me, and then we'll open it up to the students. So our first speaker is Dr. Robertson, who will talk about the international perspective.
I'm supposed to talk about myself?
At first.
Rather uniquely, I think that my life experiences have brought me to be an internationalist in the field of education, and partly because my first teaching job was in Berlin, Germany, and then I've lived in Austria and Turkey, as well as the United States. And because of that international experience, I started looking for the connection of international and education. And my current role is in the Gerald Reed Center at the Kent State University. It's a special endowed center, which means that some professor of education years ago gave a lot of money to this center just to have an international perspective to the College of Education at Kent State. And so it is with my personal background, a lifelong public educator, and now later in life, a PhD in international education, to work particularly in this field.
Great. And again, my name is Julian Rogers, and I run an organization called Education Voters, and we work on public education policy here in the state of Ohio. We're part of a national organization with additional offices in New York, Philadelphia, Massachusetts, and Delaware. But I am locally here from Ohio. I'm from Cleveland. I went to Cleveland Heights High School, Ohio University, and Case Western Reserve for my master's. And I got into this field because obviously I have a passion for education. I worked for 7 years for the Cleveland School District as an administrator there, and also dabbled in politics. So when Education Voters came to Ohio, they were looking for someone that had the unique experiences in both public education and in policy and in politics. And that's what I do as an organization. I spend a lot of time in Columbus working with our state legislators on policy. We work a lot with communities throughout the state to get input from parents and teachers and concerned citizens on what they would like to see for their schools. We take that information and generate reports and polls and all types of other things that politicians like to see, and provide that material to them so in hopes that they will act in the best interest of you guys. And that's why I'm here.
And I'm Jim McLoughlin. I grew up in New York City on West 55th and 8th Avenue above my father's Irish pub, Wednesday, St. Patrick's Day. And that was a very defining experience for me to grow up just one block over from Broadway, because when you're in New York like that, you expect almost every third person to be from someplace else. And that gave me an early fascination with the notion of teaching and learning from a global perspective. The other thing about New York is everywhere you go, you have unique opportunities to learn, and with all the museums and other kinds of cultural experiences, it was almost play and recreation to go to MoMA or the Met or something like that, or play hockey at Columbia University. I never went to Columbia University, but I did play hockey at Columbia University. And so that whole kind of experience set up a notion that teaching and learning was very global. You learned how to do things in very informal ways as formal ways. And so when I went on to teach 40 fifth grade boys, yes, that's true, my class had 40 fifth grade boys up in the Bronx, and later on when I taught outside of Boston in learning disabilities, I was always bringing in the community and taking my students out into the community, because I really thought that teaching and learning was that kind of interaction back and forth. And so as a result of that, I wound up taking degrees in philosophy and special education and studying in Providence, Rhode Island, Washington, D.C., BU in Boston, University of Arizona in Tucson, and then went on to be a university prof at the University of Utah, Virginia Tech, University of Kentucky, University of Louisville, and for 15 years I've been a dean here at CSU in the College of Education and Human Services. So you can see that my perspective on what teachers should do and what kind of opportunities should be provided students in terms of learning are a little bit different than the traditional ones.
I'm Mark Freeman. I'm the guy that deals with this more in the classroom and in the school district. I'm a longtime school superintendent. To give you my quick thoughts on this, and we'll get to questions. I think of words as exceptionally powerful, and just a word can set you in motion one way or the other. And I'll ask Jay, when young people get into trouble in the juvenile justice system, sometimes they're sent to, and the term for it is a school, and it starts with an R. Do you know what word I'm thinking of? Does anybody?
Rehabilitation?
No. Reform school. It's called reform school. You know, you do something wrong, you need to be reformed. Even the subject of the discussion tonight is reform. It makes the assumption, or could lead people to believe, that teachers and students are doing things wrong. Words are very, very powerful. We're going to talk about how I believe the state of Ohio has failed the children and teachers of this state, and how the country is on that path too, and let's not be deceived by words. Rich?
Okay. Thank you very, very much for those opening comments. So I guess the first question might be, it's titled Education Reform. What does that mean to you from your individual perspectives? What does that mean?
We know what it means to me.
Right, I know.